Welcome to the virtual pre-session to Elevate Women, Get On Board series, which is a four-part program bringing highly successful board members and board governance experts together to highlight the benefits, give us some insights and best practices to becoming a highly sought after for-profit board candidate. In this session, we are discussing who is the ideal board candidate and why. I am your host, Angela Timberlake. I'm the Vice President of Elevate Women with Jax USA, and I'm thrilled to have our guest with us here today, Yolande Piazza, Vice President of Financial Services for Google Cloud. Yolande, welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's great to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the majority of our audience does know who you are, but for those that don't, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, your journey, and how you have the experience to talk through board service with me today?
Absolutely. So as you just mentioned, I am currently at Google, and which was a mass transition from my prior life, which was 30 plus years in banking. My last role was the CEO of Citi FinTech, which was a phenomenal opportunity, and I think gave me the opportunity to bridge into an organization like Google. But since we're on the topic of boards, I actually started my board journey back in 2010, and actually started here close to home with the Daniel Foundation, which was a phenomenal opportunity to get the experience for a cause that I was really passionate about, and cut my teeth in that new environment. From there, I've had other opportunities. I was actually chair of the board of EFMA. And that was also just a phenomenal experience to actually now think about my role as actually, how do I lead? What are the disciplines? What's my responsibility? What's my accountability? And from there, I, about 18 months ago, accepted a position with H&R Block. So moved from nonprofit into that world, and it's been just a phenomenal experience, as well as sitting on some advisory boards as well, which keeps me thinking about new products, new technology, and new opportunities, and how the market's shifting.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about a little bit about who should be an ideal candidate, and then just why, and how do we even get started. So you and I have had conversations before about how women tend to gravitate towards the nonprofit sector and how that's a great entry point. Can we talk a little bit about that, about why that's a good starting point, and then how do we even think about transitioning to for-profit?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I'm a big supporter of starting with nonprofit. One, I think there's an opportunity to do that earlier in your career, before you may have all of the experiences that are sought after, which we can talk about. I think that nonprofit is a safe space to learn the protocols and the disciplines and the language. I mean, when I first started, there was this bizarre language that I had to go learn around the formalities, because you have a responsibility, and that needs to be documented and recorded, and we're looking for people to everybody buy in to the decisions that are made. So I think nonprofit gives you an opportunity to really understand structure, understand the importance, and kind of test your way in to, is it for me? I also think nonprofit, you have the opportunity to really get engaged and follow your passion as well. So I big supporter, big champion of why it makes sense to go down that path, earlier in your career.
That's great. So where do you even start to, so you get all that experience, which is definitely a launching off point. Where do you even begin to start thinking about, how do I transition this to a for-profit? And is there a difference?
Yeah, I think that let's be honest, especially, the large for-profits, they are looking for extensive experience in your career, for somebody that's really going to help advise, and overall look at their company, their business, their strategy, their planning, and be somebody that can challenge it appropriately, and help make it better. So to do that, you need to have, the experiences to back it up. But I also think there's a big piece about self-promotion. And how do you even let people know that you're interested? And, LinkedIn is absolutely key. If you're interested in sitting on a board, go flag it in your profile on LinkedIn, because there's two things that I think organizations are going to look for. They are going to look for title in for-profit, but it will be title, interest, experience, right? Having experience on boards, even in nonprofit, is absolutely key. And then the overall experience and the diversity of your career to show that you can add, be multi-dimensioned. Now, I would say that I've also seen a shift of some of the boards looking for very particular skills, like somebody really that comes with a technology bent. But even then, they're looking for diversity, across your career, to show that you can, challenge and ask the right questions and, really be able to ensure and help validate the path that the company and the organization is on. So, I used to see it a lot more that it starts with, the CEO titles or the C-suite titles. I have seen a shift now, which I think is really good, because I think you get a different level of diversity in the boardroom. But it's it generally, first thing you have to do is even make sure that people know that you're interested. Otherwise, you're not going to get considered unless you, are out there aggressively networking, which is something that I also believe that people should be doing, is make it known that this is what you're interested in doing.
That's great. That's great advice. Now, you talked about the title piece of that, right? So it takes, quite a long time to get to that C-suite point. So what are the things that we need to be thinking about, and women in general, to sort of position ourselves in the right place to make ourselves available for those roles?
I think you need to get to a point where you're thoughtful about the shifts in your career. I mean, if it is your intent that this is something you're super passionate about and you really want to make sure that you are on that journey, I think you need to be very thoughtful about the roles, about diversity in roles, about things that are going to help elevate you, about being very externally present, having a voice externally, through different, depending on what industry you're in, having a voice on the industry that you're in, being a spokesperson, putting yourselves out on panels. And so people can absolutely go in and look and see you before they even talk to you. So taking the time to make sure that you're posting that on LinkedIn in different social demographics, so that you start to build a reputation for yourself as somebody really knowledgeable in your discipline. That is a big piece of, if you're asked to speak, if you're engaged in those different communities, and people start to see that and pick that up, you already have a level of credibility that somebody that is more, internally focused just within their own organization is ever going to have. So I think that's a key piece. I do think finding the right events and the right networking events is absolutely key, and seek out other board members that have both nonprofit and for-profit, and really dig into what's important to you. What do you want to know? Everybody will bring something different to any board that they sit on. What is it that you think that you can bring? And make sure that you're talking to like-minded people so they can help you amplify that message and be really deliberate about why you would be a valid candidate for these opportunities.
Yeah, it's a lot of self-marketing, which women tend to not do very well. So there's a skill in, I think, doing it more and practicing and getting that comfortable with what you want to say and how you want to say it, and your value proposition is, a great place to start having those conversations.
I completely agree, and I think even doing that on your nonprofit, again, it's this really safe space to start. And I'm not saying by any means that they're not as serious or not as important, but I think a lot of, nonprofits and the ones that I've been on, some of those are like committee orientated. So you can actually be more selective around, like, if you're really interested on the finance side, or if you're really interested in the, to be able to go help raise money, that there are areas that you can get into that brings your skills in a smaller space, and you don't have to have this entire view of an organization. But I also think another great place is thinking about advisory boards. If you're passionate about the industry you're in, if you're passionate about, helping others and figuring out how to lift them up, working with, companies like the VC companies, or, with a company that's just trying to get off the ground, and being part of their growth development is an incredibly powerful story to tell. So, I think there's actually kind of 3 different, boards to think about the approach. And I think it's worth stepping back and really spending the time to think about, where do I want to play? I see advisory boards that are very passion orientated. I think, for profit are more diverse. So you have to be more informed on multiple topics of, all of the aspects of running a business. And nonprofit, really, it does allow you, again, to go in and focus on more of, quite often, those social passions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about, how would I even know that I am ready? Right. So let's say I have the title. I haven't really delved into board service at all. How do I even know that I'm ready to begin that?
It's a great question, Angela, and I'm not sure that you're ever completely ready, in all honesty. And I think this is a very typical thing of women, that we think we have to be perfect on everything, and we think we have to know it all before we'd even put our hand up. But again, it really depends where you want to play. So it's there's a couple of things. Do you have the time? Right? Boards are time consuming. You have to go in prepared. You have to read all of the material. You have to be able to understand the material. Like, are you comfortable reading a company's, 10K as an example, and knowing what questions to ask as a result of it, right? How does that spark your curiosity? But being curious is really important, in a board, right? Why did you make those decisions? How did you get there? What's the implications, of if this program or this strategy doesn't work? Knowing that you feel like you're really comfortable with getting under the covers, without assuming that you have to do the job. I think sometimes there's a tendency for boards, and I know I did this at first. I wanted to jump right in with the teams on the ground and do that. That's not my job. My job on the board is to be able to advise, to ask questions, to share knowledge and experience if I've seen some of the same things, and to really make sure that the risk practices that are what they need to be, and that that overall that the company and the CEO, as an example, is leading and steering the company on the right path. So you have to be comfortable in yourself asking those questions, asking the challenging questions, in a room full of people that may be way more experienced than you. So I think when boards and CEOs are looking to staff their boards, they're looking for experience. They're looking for an understanding, of their business. They are looking for curiosity. They are looking for somebody that isn't going to be meek, but at the same time isn't going to come in and just, it's not the way I would do it, type thing. That can communicate a message in a positive way. And so I think quite often we think we have to be everything, and you really don't. And I think the best way to test yourself in is our boards for you. Can I make the time? can I be comfortable in that type of environment, is to go down the nonprofit early in your career. And then you'll start to say, do I have a passion for this? Do I love this? Do I love the diversity? It's something different than I do every day in my current role, or maybe it's not, or maybe you only want to do advisory boards. So I think testing your way in is a very safe and healthy approach.
I love it. That's great advice. Now, one thing we have quite a few of here in Northeast Florida is we have a strong presence of women business owners. In your opinion, do you think entrepreneurs and small business owners are desirable for-profit boards?
Absolutely. You're running a business. It's not so much the size of the business, it's the scope of what are all the things that you have to think about. You have to think about profit, you have to think about risk, you have to think about talent, you have to have a strategy. If you're doing all of those things, then it makes you very, I think, desirable, in the community and on these types of boards. And don't think you should shy away from it. I still go back to that self-promotion. Make sure people know that is something you're interested in. You got to have people looking at you, and don't get discouraged, right? If you go for a couple of board interviews and it doesn't work out, it just means that's not the right board for you right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great advice too, because it is a process, and we're going to talk a little in one of our sessions about the resilience that you need going through this process, because you won't get a yes the first time typically. So there's a lot to be said for that. Now,
but I think there's a great opportunity. Sorry, Angela, I think it's a great opportunity to use that to get the feedback of what they would be looking for. So don't be shy to ask, okay, this didn't happen this time, but can you give me the feedback of what you would have been looking for, to say, was I shooting too high for my first one, or was it I didn't portray myself in a way that they were looking for, even though I know I can do that. I think it's great learning, and I think even from just interviews in itself, having the confidence to ask for feedback is so powerful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, before we close this out, I do want to talk, we've talked about how we give back and we would give to a board, and the commitment that it takes from us. So that takes a lot from a woman, right? To make sure that they can give the time, the commitment, and take them away from other things. So from your perspective, what would somebody gain? What do they gain personally and professionally from being on a for-profit board?
On a for-profit board, I gain a different level of understanding of all of the things to be thinking about, when you literally are running an organization, especially in financial services. I think, as everyone knows, it's highly regulated, along with, many other industries. But understanding all of the areas of vulnerability, and understanding how and why so many decisions are made that feel like, to the rest of the organization, that people are just saying no for the sake of saying no, as an example. And once you get down to the root of it, of the stuff that is private and isn't shared publicly and shouldn't be shared publicly, you get a completely different view of how your business that you're in runs and operates. I also think I find that every time I go through the board meeting, I come out learning something new. I feel like I've grown every time I go through that, because there's something in there, and especially as I'm reading the material, that makes my head hurt. And that's a good thing, because it means I'm continuing to learn. It means that I'm continuing to explore. And I can tell you the experiences, even when I was on even nonprofit, this isn't just for-profit, they made me a better leader by being able to, once a quarter, switch and think about something completely differently, but from a lens of, this is a business that needs to run and operate. And I find it incredibly valuable. The other thing is I'm a huge believer of pay it forward. I'm a huge believer of how do we lift the next generation, and how do we embrace the entrepreneurial community. So advisory boards are a phenomenal way to feel like I am giving back, because you can act as a coach, you can act as a challenger, and you can really start to figure out how do you help people take their ideas and their models to the next level. So I think there's something in it for everyone if you're passionate about it. But I will tell you, if you can't find the time, I would imagine it's very stressful. Being unprepared for a board is never a good place to be. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been super helpful. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your experience as always. Is there one piece of advice or one thing that you want to leave our audience with as they are, sitting there thinking about, should this be me? What should I be doing? And how do I do it?
It's do it. Put yourself out there. The first thing I hope everyone does is goes and checks their LinkedIn profile if they're interested in this, and make sure that they check the box to say that they're interested in it. The next thing is look at your LinkedIn profile. Does it talk to the diversity of roles that you have? And if you are doing things externally, are you promoting that? Are you your own best social media campaign? And so they would be the things that I would say, go do it immediately. And you may not get a call back or someone ping you. I know 12, 18 months. But the fact is, you've done the first step of really putting yourself out there. So if you're wondering, if you're saying I want to do it, but I'm wondering whether I should do it, I would say just go do it, try it, and have fun with it.
Just go do it and have fun. I love it. That's the last piece of advice. Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you. This will be a great entry point for those joining our program that will last the remainder of the year. So I appreciate you coming and kicking it off.
And thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.